Kia ora, good evening. Research released today reveals New Zealand wastes almost $1 billion worth of food a year. The Love Food, Hate Waste campaign launched today in Southland after the results revealed the average household in the region throws out more than $560 worth of edible food per year, equating to about $21 million annually for the region. WasteNet Southland has been working in conjunction with Waste Management New Zealand to work out just how much Southland and the country waste their food.
Yeah, well, about 12 months ago, a group of us at the councils decided that we needed something to do around minimising food waste, because we realised that about 30% of the waste that goes into our curbside red rubbish bins was food waste. So we got together with the Wasteman's Institute and put a project together. So over the last 12 months we've been gathering data furiously around seeing exactly how much food is wasted in New Zealand.
All three Southland councils have worked together and are launching the Love Food, Hate Waste campaign to do something about it.
Today is our official launch, so it's quite exciting. We've got like a huge phone book of statistics and information that we've collected over the while, and we've now officially allowed to release it because all our data has been collected.
So what will this campaign consist of?
It depends which council you're at. So for us, we're kind of doing it quite quietly in terms of just releasing some information around this is what Southlanders are doing. Because at the moment we're focusing on recycling right, so getting people to put the right contents in their yellow recycling bins. However, we are still working with the national group to see how the behaviour change program comes out of this research to actually so first off, we're letting people be aware of how much food we're wasting, and then we'll put some measures in place in a more formal campaign into the future about how to actively encourage people to be more food wise.
And perhaps equally as surprising as the amount of food being wasted was the type of food Kiwis were throwing out.
It was quite amazing that bread is the number one thing that people put in their rubbish bins. And when you look at the images there's a cool graphic of how much food they covered. I think it was like a family wastes something like 79 kilograms of food in a year that could have been eaten, and it was bread, potatoes that looked perfectly fine, bags of chips that weren't even opened, chunks of cheese that had a little bit of mould on that if you just chop the cheese off it was still perfectly fine. So there was a lot of surprises and some not so surprising things in there as well.
So you're obviously not talking about scraps of food. Can you define what edible food actually is?
Yeah. So it's the food such as whole pieces of bread, whole apples, or even a half an apple. It's basically stuff that people could have eaten in another way as opposed to just chucking it out. So for example, if you took a bite out of an apple, chucked it in the fridge to have for later, and then decided, oh no, I don't really want that, well, you could have chopped off the bitten piece and stewed the rest of it, or made it into a smoothie and those sorts of things. So same as if you had a cooked chicken and you got some leftovers, you could put that on a pizza the following night as opposed to just chucking it in the rubbish because you didn't have anything to use it for.
And as part of the national campaign, councils are arming themselves with tips to give local residents how best to save their food.
Probably the best bet is actually to go to the Love Food, Hate Waste New Zealand Facebook page. There you're going to get daily tips about and recipes. There's awesome leftover recipes on there. The next one would be just to simply have a look in your cupboards before you actually go out to the supermarket. Check the use by dates and plan your meals around what you've actually got in the cupboard. And even when you're shopping, have a think about what meals you're going to be making in those times in the use by and the best before dates.
And while Kiwis are throwing out food, figures released today show food prices are falling after rises in both January and December. According to Statistics New Zealand, food prices fell 0.7% in February following a 1.3% rise in January. Fruit and vegetables led the fall in prices, down 2.4%. Meat, poultry and fish fell 1.6% and grocery food fell 0.6%, with lower prices for snack foods, yoghurt and bread. But the figures show year on year, food prices have increased 1.5% on the same time last year, with fruit and vegetable prices increasing 11% from February 2014. National guest nights for January 2015 are still on the rise for the 10th consecutive month. National guest nights for January were up 3.8% higher than the same time last year, according to Statistics New Zealand. 10 out of 12 regional areas had higher guest nights in January, including Southland, which saw a 3.1% increase on January 2014. South Island guest nights were up nearly 5%, with hotels and holiday parks accounting for most of the increase. After removing seasonal variation, national guest nights fell 1.1% on December last year, following a 0.3% rise. And staying with us after the break, Mayor Tim Shadbolt goes to film school and the ICC's attempt to keep the city tidy. Welcome back. The Invercargill City Council is targeting untidy sections and derelict properties in a bid to keep the city safe and tidy. The housing stock and overgrown sections projects have seen properties in Bluff and Invercargill spruced up for the good of the neighbourhood. We went to the City Council to find out which properties are being targeted and why.
We're targeting sections that are often empty, and they've been empty for years, and you can drive around and see them, and they've got grass up around the windows of maybe an old dilapidated building that's on the property, or they're just empty and they have no one maintains them at all. So during the summer months especially, they're a fire hazard, and people tend to dump rubbish on them as well because they're empty. So we've got about 60 sections that are on our database. There may be more, but out of that they all get, I think 45 of them were identified as having long grass and rubbish on them and didn't meet our bylaws. So they all got a notice, and they would have got several letters, and out of that there was quite a high percentage, I think 70% of those people didn't take any notice of that. So they all got a formal warning, and as a result we had to end up mowing them and sending them a bill.
What kind of cost is it to clear a section in Bluff and get rid of the rubbish, depending obviously how much rubbish there is?
It's quite expensive, Bluff, because it's difficult terrain there, and a lot of them have never been cared for a number of years. So we could be looking up to $5,000 per section.
As far as buildings or home properties that perhaps are a little unsightful, perhaps there may be health concerns around that.
We've got a number of those in Bluff, and we are working at the moment as how we can, I suppose, encourage owners to improve them. And we're just working on a project like that now. And it is ones that are completely abandoned, that's, I think, quite easy we can deal with. But it's ones that where people are living in is a wee bit more complicated. And we can't be putting people out on the street.
Have you approached some property owners already at this stage?
We have, and it is, as I say, it's difficult when you've got people living in them, especially if they own the property. If it's rental, then we've got a wee bit more leverage to work with the landowner.
At what stage does a property become condemned?
We have a criteria mainly under the Building Act, and our building inspectors will go out and look at it. They have set criteria. It could be either dangerous, which we can act immediately, or insanitary, and they assess that, and but dangerous we can act immediately. Sanitary, we've got to get the owner to make it sanitary.
How common is that happening in Invercargill?
Very common. We've got I think the big problem for us is as we're an ageing population, ageing housing stock, and the cost of healthcare, etc. We've got to get warm, dry homes because that's a direct relationship with people's health. So it's an issue for us. I think for us, we're getting more and more complaints about people living in damp conditions or poor housing, and we only have to drive around Invercargill. You can see the number of old houses here that and Bluff that we need to work on.
There's got to be some sort of deterrent for landowners to want to take that responsibility, otherwise we'd all be doing it. That's
right. So the deterrent is that if you don't manage it, we'll manage it, and you'll pay quite a premium for us to do that, and hopefully that will be the incentive to get landowners to take the incentive and do it themselves.
Mayor Tim Shadbolt will be heading to film school next week to get some tips for his multi-million-dollar movie. Last year, the Mayor indicated he would like to push for a multi-million-dollar blockbuster film in Southland, and now he might be putting it in the hands of the city's students. The Mayor will be discussing his idea for a James Bond style movie with SIT film students and hoping for some award-winning ideas.
Mayor Tim Shadbolt for some time has had this dream of being one of the first New Zealanders to instigate a co-production between China and New Zealand. At the moment there is a project that is in the early stages of development, and I think Tim is very keen to beat them to the punch in terms of actually getting the funding to push it into production. But it's a dream that he's had evidently for quite some time. Just to help, I suppose, shift international attention towards Southland, to showcase the region. It's going to be, I see it as a fully collaborative endeavour between Mayor Tim and my students. And I think it's a great experience for them to be able to, share ideas with Mayor Tim. He's an absolute character. He has an international profile. He's probably the most famous and colourful mayor that we have in New Zealand. And it's also going to be a great experience for our students in terms of taking raw ideas and fleshing them out into a fully fledged feature film concept. And so we will be, during the course of our classes, looking at feature film structure, and then I suppose in a way they're also putting on their producers' caps, which means they will be taking some of listening to some of Tim's commercial imperatives and applying those to the narrative objectives and creating a film out of it.
And how do the students feel about this?
My students are very excited by the prospect of not only working with Tim, but also the prospect of helping to write a feature film that could actually happen and hopefully take off in the Chinese market. And let's face it, the Chinese market is the biggest in the world. So yeah, I think they're quite excited.
And now let's take a look at today's weather.
Forecast on Q is brought to you by Environment Southland. Environment Southland wants to know what you think about our recreational water areas. Where do you go? What do you do? And your thoughts about the water quality. You could win one of 5 $100 vouchers simply by completing their survey. The survey will help them find out whether the water is being tested in the right places and how the service can be improved. Complete the survey online by going to Environment Southland's website or pick up a hard copy from Environment Southland, the Southland District Council, Gore District Council, Invercargill City Council or Public Health South.
And here's your weather for Thursday the 12th of March. For Auckland today, a high of 24, a high of 19 for both Wellington and Christchurch today, 20 for Queenstown, Manapori and Dunedin both a high of 21, 22 for Gore, 23 for Invercargill and a high of 19 for Stewart Island. Tomorrow Southland will see a bit of scattered rain developing in the morning, high of 18 for both Winton and Wyndham tomorrow and 16 for Riverton. 16 for Tuatapere tomorrow, 17 for Invercargill and 18 for Gore. 19 for Te Anau tomorrow, a high of 20 for Queenstown and 17 for Nightcaps. And to the marine forecast for Fovo. Northwest knots changing westerly 30 knots, sea becoming rough for a time with a south swell of 2 metres. And to Pusica, northerly 35 knots becoming westerly 30 knots, sea very rough in the west with fair visibility and rain developing. And the long range forecast for Saturday, increasing high cloud, northwesterlies developing. Sunday, high cloud, northerly breezes, and Monday, mostly cloudy with light winds. And that's it from us this Thursday. Stay with us, sports up next, but from the news team, good night.